One.
Tired.
We stood close enough that I had to tilt my chin up a bit.
Sorry.
Eye contact.
I don't
See,
even know.
listen, Siri and Alexa can go fuck themselves because they keep listening to me and talking to me like right now. I know I said your name, but I'm not talking to you. Stupid. I'm seriously gonna get rid of all of them.
I'm telling you, we're being listened to by Zuck and Musk.
Duck and I'm calling him Trusk.
Trusk.
Yeah. So might as well just jump into it. But
This is too
obviously, there's way too much for us to recap since our last recording, which was when?
like November.
I know. I thought it was like Halloween, but
It might be.
I don't even remember what was it? What was the last book we covered? I know I did The Immortal.
It was after the election, wasn't it?
Yeah, because we were talking about, we were talking about the antagonists of Capitol Hill. So it wasn't a book. We were just like
Yeah.
talking about the craziness that was going on. But we're going to pivot in that we're just going to stick to the books and we're going to relate them to what's going on today.
Okay.
Or at least that's what I'm going to do because I don't have the emotional capacity is that right? The emotional capacity. Does that make sense? To do it. And I think, and that's a strategy, that's their strategy is to flood us with scary, crazy, out there things so that we just become apathetic and just give up.
Yeah.
And also they're doing it to sort of push what's normal. So it's like nothing's normal anymore. So when we do all this crazy stuff, like, the Hitler salute at the inauguration, was that the inauguration? Or was it? Whenever
I
he did
think
that.
so, right?
Yeah.
Or was that like the convention the day before? I don't know. It
Yeah,
was around that
whatever it
time.
was. Whenever he did that, when then he's, didn't even come out and say that he didn't do it. He just made like inappropriate jokes on X about it. But my point is he's doing that, they're all doing that so that we no longer question, like say, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Did you hear what he did? Because there's too much to keep up with. But knowing that is half the battle. And knowing that, we're not going to let them, make us apathetic anyway, is the first step in just fighting for a better tomorrow.
Welcome to MILF.
I'm Courtney.
And I'm Jennifer.
And we are two moms into literary freedom. So because it's Black History Month, which I believe and you never know like what's like real and what's not anymore, but like I did read that there were discussions about getting rid of Black History Month, like as a thing.
Of all the, yeah.
The Department of Defense has, not the Department of Defense, it's related to the Department of Defense, but one of their sub-departments has actively canceled all of those kind of history months.
So it is happening. It's not like maybe like an official, like, hey, we are now getting like absolving all of Black History Month, but it is being done in different departments.
Because they're calling it DEI.
Yeah, because it's DEI. I would like to introduce my friend, Tam Tam, who I just kind of jumped into this.
Are we officially like on?
Yes.
Oh, okay, wait, I didn't know that.
So yes, I have been recording. But so this is Tam Tam. Her name is Tamara. She does not like to be called Tammy. So, and I always forget that. So I'm just like, her name is Tam Tam. That's how your nickname originated, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't be mad at me. Okay. I'm sort of like forcing her on this podcast against her will, but she is our religious expert for today. Because I'm covering a letter from Birmingham Jail by MLK Jr. in honor of Black History Month. And he has a lot of religious references in this letter. Like some guy named Nebuchadnezzar, who I didn't even know how to say it until Tam corrected me. So do you know who Nebuchadnezzar or Nezer?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar? Have you heard of Nebuchadnezzar?
No.
Okay, true or false?
No.
Nebuchadnezzar was a bad guy in the Bible. True or false?
Nebuchadnezzar. I'm going to say true.
Good. Right?
I mean, yes and no. Yes. He was a pagan king who later came to declare the God of Israel as God, but then he backslid and was just full of himself, and he ran his country. It was severely classist. It was kind of like the times that we're in now.
Mhm.
It was all about his wealth and the oligarchy, and then the rest of the people were thrown to the wolves.
So that's like right now.
Right.
So Nebuchadnezzar's like
He was the
trust.
king of Babylon. I know you guys have heard of Babylon. He was the king
Yes.
of Babylon.
I mean, I've heard of like the Babylonian heads. Is that a thing? The Hanging Garden? No?
Yes,
But were they heads?
I don't know. I've heard of the Hanging Garden.
I think
but
I
don't
made that
think
up.
so.
Is Babylon the one that got like destroyed and the family, the wife looked back?
That's Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, okay. See,
Which
Yeah,
is
no.
why we have Tamara as our religious expert.
I'm not an expert.
She is. Um,
Between the three of us, you're definitely the expert.
look, it's Blake. Wave. Okay, so anyway, let's just jump into it. So like I said, Black History Month, MLK Jr. Also, the inauguration was on MLK Day.
Right.
And I don't want to say that, like, let's just say Kamala won, right? The inauguration would still be on MLK Day. Like, they wouldn't
Right.
change the date, but they would have honored him in a much more respectful way if Kamala was elected,
I have a feeling it would have been in a big way.
in a huge way.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
But from what I saw on my social media, all I was seeing were like negative posts by like people saying, you know, it's not MLK Day. Don't celebrate Martin Luther King. Today is
Really?
Trump Day. Celebrate Trump. Yeah, I just kept seeing like people were
Oh my
really
gosh.
saying how
You
horrible.
need to fix your algorithm, girl.
No. Let me clarify. It was people's outrage at those people.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, maybe my algorithm is like should have like white supremacy in it, so I can keep up with like what's going on.
Right.
You know, really confuse the algorithm there. But yeah, did you see any of that stuff?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I did.
not surprising.
I do have white supremacy in my algorithm to keep up on it. And I did see a lot of time to do away with this for once and for all. Trump's going to take it away. And they were right.
Yeah.
He's very interested in getting rid of this.
And he told us that's what he was going to
And
do.
he said it, and they are all for it. And that's what's kind of hard to believe, I guess, about the moment we're in.
Mhm. And you know, all we can do really is just keep up the narrative and expose the rhetoric, and you know, just have an open conversation that hopefully one or two people will listen to. We did have quite a few listeners last summer, so
Really?
I have a feeling we can get them back. We just have to start releasing episodes
Being
again.
consistent.
So I think our next episode, Jennifer is covering 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult, and we will be talking about guns.
Yay.
Hey, it's so fun. Oh my God. I love the timeline.
I'm struggling. I'm struggling to get through it just because like my mind is not on wanting to read about things like this, but
Mhm. You're reading a lot
But
of
it's a good book.
Mass.
yeah, I like reading fantasy because then I don't have to. It's very hard for me to read realistic stories because I feel like reality is so much worse than
Uh-huh.
what's happening in books.
Mhm. Mhm.
Fantasies, you know, I can disassociate
Yeah.
and be like, yeah, even though it's political, because all books are political. I've seen that
Mhm.
stance, you know, like let's not bring politics into books. No, books are political,
Mhm.
but it's a different kind of politics. It's not
Well, yeah, and
based in reality.
it's a way, it's a self-preservation tactic
Mhm.
for you. And I think in today's world, we desperately need that. And Tam Tam is going to go home and she's going to watch The Last Man on Earth. Have you seen it yet?
Yes.
You have? Did you like
Yes.
it?
Yes, I loved it.
Okay. Well, I'll think of
I
it.
still haven't watched it.
It is, but it's a great way to escape.
Yeah.
But it is kind of political because it's like, you know, they're all dead from a virus, which was like, you know, real close reality there for a hot minute. But
Yeah.
yeah, so you
I don't mind it if it's based in reality, but it's not
Mhm.
so realistic. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I
True
can see that
crime.
happening, but it's not actually happening. But like a gun, you know, a school shooting, those
Mhm.
actually happen. So-
True. Yeah, it's really hard to read. Yeah. I guess we should jump into it, huh?
all right, let's go.
So, just to give you guys a backstory on this, which Tam has read a long time ago. Have you read it at all? The letter? Okay. I hadn't either.
Maybe I have at one point, but I cannot tell you.
We never, like when we were being taught this in high school, we were taught, the civil rights movement, a couple of Jim Crow laws, and then that's it. Then we moved on to the next thing. It was not a lot of information. It was pretty whitewashed. It still is. But now this is officially banned, not only by parents who disagree with, the quote radicalism that he is discussing in this letter, but because it goes against Trump's whole, anti-DEI, because we've seen that he is threatening to pull funding from schools who have anything to do with critical race theory, which we know isn't taught in elementary schools, but he doesn't know what that is because he does not care to inform himself what that is. But to him, it's anything that has to do with race. Is that correct?
And it's very broad, right?
Yeah, it's anything that has to do with.
Yeah, it's just, I think he knows what it is. I think he's just playing stupid so that he can manipulate and decide what he can ban and not ban.
You're right about that. I shouldn't even give him the credit of being ignorant. Like he fully knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he knows.
So this letter was banned in Florida before Trump was even, elected, because Florida is basically what the country is going to become. So
right, they're leading the charge in ignorance.
And I think I saw somewhere that we are tied with another state in terms of like the most book bans, which
Texas, right?
I don't know. I thought
Texas.
Oklahoma, one of those.
Yeah, it's got to be the South, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, to give you some context, Martin Luther King Jr. was put in a jail in Birmingham, Alabama, because he was parading without a permit. So he was engaging in nonviolent protest, and this letter is addressed to a bunch of clergymen. Is it clergy? Clergy. It's clergy. What's a clergyman?
People in the church.
So it's just like a broad term for church people. So this is a letter to church people. I'm going to really simplify it. I don't want to disrespect Martin Luther King in his words, because he is a wonderful writer, and you should read or listen to this letter on just go on your podcast and type in letter from a Birmingham jail, and it'll pop up and you can hear someone who's much better at speaking than I am read it, and it's beautiful, beautiful words, but I'm going to try and simplify it. But he opens up his letter to these clergymen with just the utmost respect. Like he's super respectful, but he says, I want to address the fact that, you referred to me as an outside agitator. So that term outside agitator is, it's something that we still hear today, right? Sometimes like if we're talking about like protests, like, and you're watching the news, like you'll hear a report about like, oh, these protests were outside agitators, like they came from outside. It could be good, it could be bad, right? Like when we had the protests at the government building for All Boys Aren't Blue, those were considered outside agitators, right?
Right.
Because they weren't a part of Flagler County. They were the Proud Boys. But in this context of the letter, like he's being labeled as like a negative outside agitator. And so in response to that, he says, I was invited here by a local affiliate because he has the honor of serving as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And because of his work in Atlanta, he was invited to Birmingham by people who wanted to further civil rights and to bring awareness to segregation. And so he was invited to engage in a nonviolent direct action program, which is basically what the whole letter is about, is about how, he and his followers have been engaging in nonviolent protest. And so he starts out by kind of giving you 4 basic steps of any nonviolent campaign. And I'm going to ask if you guys have heard any of any of this, because I think this is part of the reason why this letter might be banned. Especially in schools. It's like, do we want to teach our kids about nonviolent campaigns? I mean, I do.
Right.
But is that the direction we're headed in? Like,
Definitely.
Yeah. So the 4 steps are fact checking, which he calls collection of facts to determine whether injustices are alive. So to me, that's just like fact checking. The second one is negotiation or communication. The third one is self purification, which I had no idea what that meant. But upon reading, I think what it means is like mental training to like prepare for the consequences of your protests. And then the last one is direct action. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would actually just say that, and not knowing the full context of this, but I would take that self-purification from a religious standpoint as having meaning to get your own house in order, because people are going to come after you based on whatever any immoral acts you've done or anything that they could interpret. So I see it as a getting your house in order and being prepared to have your name as well as your body dragged through the mud.
Okay, so it's not just like mental training, like, hey, like I'm not going to react with violence, but it's also like I need to, prepare for what's going to happen to my family if I do get put in jail.
And practice what you preach.
Cool.
Right?
So that makes sense. And there's just a ton of great quotes in here that, you've probably heard before, like you've seen on Instagram, like someone, posted it on MLK Day in honor of MLK, but
Right.
you didn't know where it came from. You didn't know, like, the whole context behind it. One of them is said right here in the first part of this letter, and it's injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Have you heard of that one?
Yes.
Like one of the most
I think
popular.
that's a popular one.
Right. And so he says that as a result of being called an outside agitator. And to me, I feel like we can draw a parallel here to the issue of immigration. Because he goes on to say, anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider. So what do you think about that in terms of immigration?
That's a loaded one.
I know. So I'm asking you.
Well, honestly, from a purely religious standpoint, being anti-immigration is anti-biblical. Jesus was certainly an immigrant in the countries that he preached in. He even says he had, even foxes have their holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So he was nomadic. He was an activist, a social justice warrior. And if he were here today, he would definitely tell us to follow the laws of our country, because that's one of the things he said. But he would advocate strongly for the inclusion of immigrants. The Bible actually talks about the inclusion of immigrants hundreds of times. It's one of the most referenced things in the Bible is to take care of the stranger, to take care of the widow, to remember that you were once a stranger in a strange land. This goes all the way back to the beginning of the Judaic culture.
And Martin Luther King Jr. says that a lot in his letter. And I'm really happy you brought that up, because on page 3 of his letter, it's 6 pages. I'm going to try and get, go in order, but I might jump around a little bit. But because Tam brought it up, he talks a great deal about laws and whether or not they're just or unjust. So even though if Jesus were here today, he would say, follow the laws of your country. But would you agree with me if I said Jesus would say, maybe agree with MLK Jr. and say, there are just laws and there are unjust laws. And I'm not saying that, I don't know anything about it, but in my world, Jesus would agree, and he would say, the unjust laws are the ones that you should break. And in MLK Jr.'s point was segregation was a law. Segregation is an unjust law that in his, in how he can validate breaking the law as a Christian, it is an unjust law.
I would actually want to refer to somebody Jewish or a Messianic Jew to interpret that, because it's very difficult to say that Jesus would advocate breaking the law.
Mhm.
He would more say that he was a fulfillment of the law, and that what had come before him has kind of passed away into this new place that we're in,
So like,
which would be inclusive. Right.
So he
But-
would say like new laws need to be made that align with what his morals or his beliefs and how
I
humans
think-
should be treated.
I think, okay, a perfect example of this is the adulteress. And most everybody knows the story where they're going to stone her, right?
Yeah.
They've gathered around the adulteress. They're going to stone her because that's the law.
I thought that
Right.
was that Mary Magdalene?
I mean, no.
No.
But so there's speculation, but I don't think they've ever
I
proven
love to speculate.
But so all of these Jewish people have their stones. They're gathered around the adulteress. They're going to fulfill the law, which says to stone her. And Jesus says, of course, let you without sin cast the first stone, right? And they all drop their stones. And so that's really, again, I don't think he would advocate for an outright like disobey or defy the law, but he would teach people in that kind of manner. He would say, what does the Bible say about the immigrant and the stranger, and how we are supposed to treat our neighbor, right?
Right.
And if there's only 2 commandments according to Jesus. And so people gloss over, a lot of people want to talk about, the 10 commandments, but there's really only 2. And that's love the Lord God with all your heart, all your mind and all your soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And neighbor is quite literally everyone,
Right.
right?
And so that kind of, that takes care of the immigrants, the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Everyone. It's a pretty simple word. Just love your neighbor as yourself. And the Bible's clear on who our neighbors are, right? And that is everyone.
Another thing that MLK Jr. says that kind of goes along with what we're saying is any law that degrades human personality is unjust, but he doesn't even say that. He actually is paraphrasing from someone named St. Thomas Aquinas, who is one of the Catholic Church's greatest theologian. Did I say that right?
Theologians, yes.
Theologian and philosopher. Look at me pronouncing all of these $5 words. So that guy, who seemed like a really, really big deal, said any law that degrades human personality is unjust, such as immigrants, denying care for trans people, and all of this bullshit that we're seeing with DEI right now. Those are all unjust laws. That takes care of the unjust part of MLK's letter. But I do want to bring up one other thing before I move on, and that's the theme of tension. So he talks about tension as like an important thing here, because he was criticized for creating such tension, right, in Birmingham with his protests. But he argues that like you can't move forward without tension. Tension is sort of like a propeller towards enacting positive social change. And he even, this is my favorite part of the letter, is when he compares it to Socrates. What do we know about Socrates? Jen, what do you know about Socrates?
Very little. I know the book that we read.
Which one? We've read a lot of books.
Genderqueer.
Oh, genderqueer. Okay.
That's the extent of.
Wait, Socrates was in genderqueer?
Wasn't that part of like the issue that they had with the little boy, the young boy, supposedly depicted in the drawing? That wasn't Socrates?
Oh, maybe. Yeah. That was a good book.
Because if it wasn't Socrates, then I know nothing. Like,
yeah.
literally, that's not.
Genderqueer, since you brought it up, we should talk about that again, because that actually talks about intersex, which is going to be a huge topic of discussion with all of this like erasure, like of people that are actually born genetically like different genders, right. and we're just, those people are just being ignored, and genderqueer does a really good job at talking about that. But so Socrates was one of the big 3, Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato.
Okay.
So they're just philosophers, right? But what I love about Socrates is that he was the one that was poisoned. Like they forced him to drink hemlock because he was basically telling his students, and not really, he asked questions. He didn't tell you anything. He was the question asker, but he would ask questions that like that were so profound and made you like think and made you really question like, is there really like a god was Poseidon a Greek god? I feel like I should know this.
Water? Wasn't Poseidon water?
Yeah, like the Greek god of the ocean or whatever.
Right.
I should read more Percy Jackson. But Socrates was like, yeah, is Poseidon responsible for these tsunamis, or is it something else? And so because he was like instilling this sense of like curiosity in his students, he was
And doubt.
yes, he was seen as a threat to their democracy. I mean, he outright said he didn't like democracy, so that didn't help his case anyway. But because of that, they forced him to drink poison and then he died. But MLK brings him up in this, section of tension where he says, just as Socrates felt that it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths, such as Poseidon, and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal, we must see the need of having nonviolent gadflies, which is like a fly that just annoys you. I had to look that up. I didn't know what a gadfly was. To create the kind of tension in society that will help men to rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. And I just really liked that part. I'm just a big fan of Socrates, that's why.
I mean, gosh. Yeah. Isn't that part of what protests do too?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's,
And we're kind of living in a time where protests are seen as a bad thing, right?
of course, because we never protest the right way. It doesn't matter how you protest, they're always going to find something negative. People are walking peacefully. Well, they block traffic.
Yep. And did you see that in LA? Isn't that happening?
Yes. Yeah. In LA, it's happening in a lot of places.
And
But LA is getting the most attention, I think.
I'm happy to hear that and to see that, but at the same time, I'm worried, is it going to result in police violence?
Oh, you already see police geared up in riot gear and kind of starting the tension too, because in my opinion, they're a lot of the times the ones that are, what's the word you just used?
Oh, the agitator.
The agitators. Thank you.
Yeah.
They're the agitators.
Yeah, yeah, and so the protesters are being labeled as as outside agitators, but then you have the police coming in agitating the nonviolent protesters. They're being the violent gadflies, which are not necessarily creating tension, well, not the good tension. They're creating the bad kind of tension,
Right.
Whereas the protest is merely just to bring awareness to something that the media isn't covering because it's owned by Elon Musk or whatever. I know that's kind of an extreme statement to make, but them's are the times that we're living in.
Yeah. It's a reporter that retired or went off at, I don't know what station, ABC, NBC, one of them.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And he signed off and pretty much was like, in my opinion, sounding warning bells like, hey, you can't trust the media anymore.
I follow,
and I'm stepping down.
Right. 4 years ago, or I don't know, what year is it, 2020? So like 8 years ago when he was first elected, or 9, or whenever that was, like if someone were to say, I think even Tam at one point said to me, like, don't, Courtney, like, I don't believe in what the media is saying. I would have just been, like, oh, it's okay. Like, it's not that bad, like pretty condescending and, whatever. And I'm sorry if I did that, but it's happening now, maybe I'm just a little late to the party, but like,
right.
And she's like shaking, like, I've been telling
I told you so.
No, but yeah, I follow Sharon McMahon, no relation to the future Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, no relation. And she's on Instagram and a few, whatever, all the social media accounts. Her handle is at Sharon Says So. And she reports, all the things that I don't think are getting reported. And she says it in a pretty fair way. So I would follow her if you're not already following her. She's pretty inspiring too.
I'll have to see if she's on TikTok because I'm off all Meta apps.
Oh yeah. We're on Blue Sky now, but like I don't think anyone's really on Blue Sky. But we need to get more people to go to Blue Sky.
Well, yeah, because I think even TikTok is compromised now.
Caucus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty bad. Yeah.
So
All right, but moving on here, I want to talk more about the white moderate. So another thing, I feel like this is a quote that isn't getting enough attention. Tell me if you've heard of this, Jennifer. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the KKK, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, and who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action. That's a really long quote, but basically the middle of the quote where it says, the Negro's greatest stumbling block is not the KKK, but the white moderate.
I think I have heard that before.
Mhm.
You know, like maybe not that specific phrasing, but I have heard Black people reiterate that, you know,
Yeah.
saying like, you know, you guys are just like in the middle, you don't speak up, you don't do enough. And they call out a lot of people who consider themselves allies.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I do see, and I don't know if they've quoted him directly, but yes, I have heard that sentiment.
And you could substitute the word Negro, which, you know, is the language in this letter, but you could
Right.
substitute the idea of race in this context for immigrants or trans people or anything like that. Because that's sort of what we're seeing now. I saw a really cool quote that I want to put on a mug. It wasn't about water fountains back then, and it's not about bathrooms now. Like that's kind of floating around, and we've all heard that. That's a pretty powerful quote.
Right.
And I think that's sort of, you know, in line with what he's saying here. Thoughts?
Just, I actually total agreement
Mhm.
because that is that lukewarm stance where you might say, well, I certainly do agree with equal rights for everyone, but then you're not going to follow it up with any kind of action that might make anyone uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I think that
Or have tension.
and that falls heavily. I see that attitude as the predominant attitude in churches today. I do think that is a don't rock the boat. We already did the civil rights movement. You know, it's done.
Mhm.
And a lot of people buy that philosophy that we reached our penultimate with equality, and that the reason we're doing what we're doing now is in order to help me with the words here. In order to actually be equal, we have to be colorblind.
Right. Yeah. And that's what so many people have been tricked into believing.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, we already did this. We achieved everything we needed
Yes.
to achieve. Jennifer?
And we see this at the polls when
yes.
people go to vote, you know, and this is, I think, where we definitely see it a lot. Like they'll tell us like, oh, you know, I don't care if people are gay. I don't care. But then they go and they vote against
Yep.
people's rights to live
Mhm.
their life how they want.
Mhm. And actually Jennifer, that reminds me of another quote about going back to unjust laws. An unjust law is a code inflicted upon a minority, which that minority had no part in acting or creating because it did not have the unhampered right to vote. And that just reminds me about and then he goes on to say, all types of conniving methods are used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. And this was in the 60s, right? And to Tam's point, we need to just not be colorblind. We achieved equality back in the 60s with the Civil Rights Act and all that. But we haven't. Like gerrymandering is a great example of that. And it's actually how we lost the House to the Republicans in 2024. We lost 16 seats because of gerrymandering, which is the unfair mapping of district lines.
Mm-hmm.
Can't
We
explain
saw
it.
that here in Florida.
Yeah. And not enough people like understand gerrymandering or like things like that. They don't understand how examples of unjust things are still happening today. Yet they're voting for the person who is like making these things continue to happen. Pause for a minute because we're gonna run out of time, so we're gonna restart.
Hope them.
And we're back. Who the hell is Karen Neighbor? Sorry, I just got a text from Karen Neighbor. Must be my neighbor.
A
Why?
Karen. That's not good.
Oh no.
Listen, I love the name Karen only because of the podcast My Favorite Murder. And one of the hosts is named Karen Kilgariff. She's my hero. She's just like, and so like when I first was like, oh, I hate the name Karen. And then I listened to this podcast and I was like, Karen is the best name ever.
All the Karens I know in real life are great. So
I don't know
I
very
just think it's hilarious.
I know. I feel bad that the Karen's got a bad. Oh my God, is that my dog?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Oh. Karen Neighbor just sent me a picture of my dog.
Uh-oh.
You naughty little.
How did she get out?
Come on. Naughty.
Uh-oh.
See, Karens are great. Karens save the world. They save
right.
dogs from being hit by cars. Who knows? Where? There you are. Okay. All right. Sorry. And
You're like, is that my dog?
I was like, who's Karen Neighbor? All my neighbors are texting me now.
People just wanted to visit
I got her.
everybody.
That's actually not a laughing matter because Maple went all Cujo on a dog last weekend.
Oh,
Damn it. Now my other neighbor is calling me. Hey, Mark. I got Maple. She rolled in something. Oh my God. All right. I got to take care of this.
But it almost looks like ashes.
It's raccoon poop.
Nice. Why have cats?
Okay. I'm just going to heavily edit that because there might be parts that are funny, but it will be heavily edited. All right. So going back to what I was saying about gerrymandering.
And I was just going to interject that a lot of people are very ignorant about how our government runs. I realized I myself thought I had a good grasp, and going through what we're going through, I realized I did not have a good grasp. But the first time that somebody came to me and talked about gerrymandering, had no idea what that was, what it meant, why it was wrong. And I relate that very easily to when they talk about needing voter ID. And
yeah.
people are all up in arms. Why wouldn't you need voter ID? Like, what is wrong with that? So redrawing district lines in the average person's mind just says, well, populations change.
Yeah,
and-
they do it with the census,
Right.
but they do it nefariously.
So I think that there's not an understanding on purpose in our culture of what these asks really are. When we say
Right.
we're gerrymandering, people really need to know what the right method is and how it's abused, right? With IDs, same thing. We need to understand what the right method is and how it's abused. I don't think that the left does a very good job of explaining to people why.
And that goes back
Right.
to the whole like white moderate thing, or the Democratic moderate.
does.
You can kind of substitute those two terms in my opinion, because it's like there are so many things that we should be educating, ourselves, but also like our youth about, like gerrymandering. Again, maybe it was just like a definition that I learned in government high school, but that's it. There were no examples of like nefarious gerrymandering, because
Exactly.
like why would we put that idea in your head? Because, our system is working just fine and there's nothing wrong with it. And like, these are just the way things are. And I think that is directly correlated to censorship and why things like this letter is censored, because in why Socrates was poisoned, is because if you are encouraging people to think about things like gerrymandering, then that's just going to result in positive social change. And we don't want positive social change,
Right.
if we're an oligarchy, right? We want things to stay the same, because we've been an oligarchy for a while.
I think
Right.
Like a lot of people are like, oh, we're an
Yeah.
oligarchy now. No, we've been an oligarchy. It's just now really obvious.
Right. It's not so subtle anymore.
so at all.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is the church, because you brought up a little bit about, I don't remember what you said exactly, but it was something about how the church has changed, right? And that's a huge theme in this letter from MLK about how he's disappointed in the church. And he is a deeply religious man, which I think, most people know. But if you read, I mean, I knew that. But then when I read this letter, I was like, wow, yes, he was a very, very deeply religious man in a good way, not in like an extreme, sort of way where you just pick and choose what you want from the Bible. Like he's a very,
He's the pastor. Well, the reverend.
a good one,
A good one.
because there are not good ones.
There are plenty of not good ones.
Like the ones who preach in our town about voting for Trump.
Right.
And you see their bumper stickers all over cars, you
And
guys.
they're subtle ones
Yeah.
because, I have them in my family
Mm.
and they consider themselves, you would think they're Hispanic. They're from countries like Guatemala. They have accents when they speak,
Mhm.
and they are still using the Bible to vote for Trump.
I don't get it.
So lost on me.
Do you get it? It's lost on you? You can't explain?
I can't, I don't understand it. And they're not, it's not obvious. If you're not looking and paying attention, they're not going to the pulpit and telling you, vote for Trump. It's very subtle how they're doing it.
Some are,
Some
yes.
are.
But
Some are. No, I'm saying like the ones that in my family that I know have done it,
hmm
they're not doing it openly.
hmm
So, it's very two-faced.
Yeah.
There, if you're listening, you're two-faced. It's very
Tell
two-faced,
him, Jen.
It's all like playing like very nice, we love everybody, praise God, blah blah blah. And then on the other side, they're like liking posts about deporting people, about
Because they've become comfortable, they've benefited in some way. And MLK does talk about that in terms of like, so let me find that quote so that I can actually explain it. Because that's when we were talking about Malcolm X. Remember?
Mhm.
A few Negroes in the middle class who, because of a degree of academic and economic security, and because at points they profit by segregation, have unconsciously become insensitive to the problems of the masses. That kind of goes along with what you were saying.
yeah.
And so, because they've become desensitized, it doesn't directly affect them. They just go with the flow. They just go with it, right? But then he goes on to say, one is a force of complacency made up of Negroes who, as a result of long years of oppression, have been so completely drained of self-respect and a sense of somebodyness that they've adjusted to segregation. And on the other hand, I already read that part. But then he goes on to talk about the other force is one of bitterness and hatred and comes perilously close to advocating violence. It is expressed in the various Black nationalist groups that are springing up over the nation. And then he refers to Elijah Muhammad's Muslim movement, which Tam was telling me is where Malcolm X was inspired. And so that's where that comes from. So it kind of just goes to what we're saying about the different groups of people and how they have different reactions to things.
Right.
But, if I can say, to talk into that point a little bit deeper, is I do blame the churches for using fear. So what they're doing is subtly saying, well, if you're here, I'll talk about immigration status. If you're here legally, right, and you did all of the right legal things, then why should you support somebody who has come in and done these things illegally, right? This is just, it's common sense.
Mhm.
But it's not a black and white issue. It's a very complex, complicated issue. And the Venezuelans are finding out right now, with the temporary protected status being targeted, that this issue is much broader.
It's not black and white.
It's not black and white, but it's a very broad issue. When do we start saying that you're an American? Now we're taking away birthright citizenship. Now we're taking away temporary protected status. Now we're making it almost impossible to immigrate legally into this nation. We're taking asylum away. And they're doing it from the pulpit. And that is what most people who go to church do not actually read their Bibles for themselves. The majority of people that go to church they put in their time on Sundays, and they treat whoever is preaching to them as the expert and the authority. Right?
Because it's easier for them. They just want to they just want information to be front loaded into their brain, and they're not going to fact check whoever is telling them. They're just going to say, I'm a good judge of character, so I trust, Reverend Bobby Joe up there that he's telling me the truth.
going to veer off just a little bit, but I think it's relevant. And one of the things that I've learned in my walk as an ally against racism is that in the 1920s in America, which was one of the heydays of our most recent or most racist time in history, the KKK boasted that they had over 40,000 ministers in churches, and these were evangelical pastors. So when you think about that number, it doesn't seem like a lot on the forefront, 40,000. Okay, not so big a deal. But how many hundreds of people is each one of those 40,000 pastors influencing, right? And that, in our country, we like to say, well, that was then and this is now.
Yeah.
However, a lot of times the pastoral occupation is generational.
Yes.
So my dad was a pastor, my grandpa was a pastor, now I'm a pastor. And just because those views went underground did not mean that they disappeared. And now they're coming back.
Yes.
Now that we've talked about
Yes.
the disappointing religious leaders of the country, let's talk about the one that has made us so proud and so happy, and so, you know, it has really like restored a little bit of my faith in Christianity and in my country and in my gender. Well, I don't want to make this about gender, but I just really like that she's a woman and that she did it, because, like, you know, as a woman, it's kind of hard to speak your truth. Bishop Marianne Buddy is awesome. Like,
So awesome.
you know, the vicious news, the news cycle or whatever you want to call it, just, you know, opening social media and seeing just like horrendous atrocity after another, you know, not just in our country, but around the whole world and Gaza and so on. And then to have like a brief reprieve of, you know, just reading about her bravery.
You know what stood out to me about her sermon, or when she spoke directly to Trump? He was sitting right next to JD Vance, right? And JD Vance is very religious, right? That's my understanding, right? Yeah. He's sitting there, and Trump at first was like paying attention because, you know, like thinking she was going to say something to him that she didn't say anything mean, but obviously she was asking him to have empathy, and clearly he has none. So you see him tuning out.
Yeah.
But what stood out to me, like, that's expected, right? Trump is the moment you're not praising him, he's going to tune you out. He's going to take offense. You're asking him to do something he doesn't want to do, and he's not going to like it. But JD Vance, being a so-called Christian, sat there, and the way his face contorted, the way you could see he was like fighting to not roll his eyes. And I was like, you son of a bitch. Because I'm like, people are looking up to you.
Keep like looking at Trump too, like, can you believe?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, just like,
it was so obvious that he was like annoyed and pissed that she was saying what she was saying. And I'm like, but you're Christian. Shouldn't that be what, you know, like, she's not asking you to do anything but to
not
have
in the
compassion
Bible
and empathy.
Yeah, but there is an elephant in the room, which is uncomfortable, and that's the fact that she is a woman.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Had she been a man delivering the exact same speech, it would have been tolerated and received much differently.
maybe just ignored.
Certainly,
Instead of like them calling for her resignation or termination. Like, didn't someone ask the Pope to fire her?
I'm sure.
But he's not going to do that.
They want the Pope fired too.
Oh,
so these are you have to remember, Christian nationalism is not Christianity.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But they will portray it that way, and they will use the Bible, and they will take things out of context. And one of the biggest things that I've seen with her sermon is the backlash of a woman should not. There is a scripture that says a woman shall have no authority over a man.
Right.
And there's another scripture that says a woman shall not preach.
But who wrote that?
And it's in Timothy, which is attributed to the Apostle Paul. However, there's a lot to unpack there that people don't understand unless you do Bible studies and really dig.
Which people aren't going to do.
They don't like
so they're
to do
just going
that.
to take that at like face
like my
value.
husband. My husband takes that at face value, and women should not be preachers, right? I can tell him till I'm blue in the face that there are a lot of time-specific cultural attitudes that were on display for that that particular city that
Mhm.
the Apostle Paul was addressing, there were other women in his ministry
Mhm.
at the same time,
Mhm.
right? So it wasn't so much about women not preaching, it was about disorderliness,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
And also, well, and you know, it was written a long time ago.
and it was written a long time ago, but
And it wasn't,
Sorry,
they weren't,
sorry.
no, it's okay. And they weren't Jesus's words either, which
They-
I think is important to point out.
they weren't.
Yeah.
And Jesus, the females in Jesus's circle were certainly equals with the males. As a matter of fact, there were times when the females were privy to information first before the men and spread that information to the men. So these are all cultural issues you have to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Certainly, Rome was a patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, Romans did not want women
Mm-hmm.
in charge or in control.
Yeah,
So if we can oppress the female voice, if we can oppress the black voice, the queer voice, whatever voices we can oppress, we
Mhm.
will. And there is a lot of heated debate right now, to be honest, about the accuracy of that book of the Bible and whether it was actually written by the Apostle Paul or not.
And you would know that if you did
If
Bible
you
studies.
did Bible studies, you would know that some of these things are
debated.
debated.
Yeah, because it was written a really long time ago, and things get lost in translation. Similar to what we were talking about, and Jen, we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
The quote that says that condemns homosexuality is not actually about homosexuality; it's about pedophilia.
Pedophilia. Yeah.
And that's the debate there, that you can't just like take this Bible verse at face value because it wasn't. And what is it?
Well, the scripture that calls homosexuality an abomination.
No, the one about a man lying with a
like
man.
Okay, and a woman lying with a woman.
I don't know. All I read was I didn't
There,
know that it had the woman part. It was just a man
Right.
should not lie with another man. But upon, just basic research, as someone who doesn't have any sort of background in religion, there is information out there that says the translation isn't a man lying with a man is an abomination or a sin. It's a man lying with a boy. And that changes the whole thing. Like,
that is still hotly debated. A lot of these things are hotly debated, but I think the one that what I was telling you before that's most encouraging to me is the scripture that calls homosexuality an abomination before the Lord. There are Jewish scholars, Hebraic scholars, that believe that word was not abomination, but was unnatural.
but to me, I still have a problem with that, because sexuality is very natural. Like, we see it across the animal kingdom. And if you look at like anthropological studies, there's lots of evidence that suggests that homosexuality was a part of like the hunter-gatherers and even Neolithic cultures.
Not unnatural in the sense that you're taking it, more of unnatural meaning outside of the bounds of what is
Normal in society. Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
So-
it is a different.
So a farmer, there are scriptures in the Old Testament that talk about a farmer having, I forget what it is now, but like if they had a two-headed cow, certainly that is unnatural,
but
it's not the cow's fault.
I see.
It is the cow is not to be punished
I see.
for its unnaturalness.
And that's why precision
Right.
of language is so important. The difference between
Exactly.
abomination and unnatural.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see your point.
And so,
Okay.
so
It's different.
yeah,
That's all.
exactly. It's something that you don't normally see.
Unnatural. I
Right.
see.
But
Yeah.
if it was created that way,
Mhm.
then you are to accept that creation,
Mhm.
right? Because it is not the creation's fault, but rather the will of the creator,
Mhm.
which puts an entirely different spin on that scripture than saying something is just an abomination and needs to
Right.
be, gotten rid of.
And I think what you're saying goes hand in hand with how the church has gotten so far away from what it originally accomplished in early Christianity, in that, like, people don't know the things that you know, because they a lot of times don't want to know, and they're not like, because we live in an age where you can research anything, right? And you have it in your pocket, and these people can go and they could do their own research. If you can read, then you can form your own opinions, but they don't want to do that. They want to go to to their church and they want to be told what to think and what to feel and what to be mad about, and they want to be told who to vote for. And what you're saying is the complete opposite of that. And I think honestly, if we're going to really go down the rabbit hole, it can be connected to the defunding of public education, because they want to defund public education so that our kids don't have these critical thinking skills, and they're not encouraged to ask questions in the same way that Socrates encouraged his students to ask questions, because asking questions leads to shifting the power to from the majority to the minority, and they don't want that.
You can make the comparison to, or not the comparison, but the Bible Belt also correlates with the lowest
Reading scores.
yes. And just in education, we're like always at the bottom.
Yeah.
So
And I'm really scared about what the next 4 years is going to look like, because we've said this before. Florida has been sort of the canary in the coal mine for our country, and education it's about to get way worse nationwide instead of just in Florida and the Bible Belt, or the South, if you will. But on a more optimistic note, states like California are fighting back, and they're saying this is illegal. You cannot defund public education because you have a list of things that you don't agree with. And they're right, that is illegal, and that's what he's doing. Here's a list of words I don't want to see in your public schools. If I see these words in any, curricula in your public schools, you will not receive a single penny from the federal government.
Right.
That is highly illegal, and it will be contested in court, and they have to file these civil lawsuits before anything can happen, right? Like nothing can happen until someone sues them.
Yeah.
They're getting
I'm
sued.
still a little worried though, because at the
I
end
am
of the day,
too. I am
keep
too.
seeing like, this is what I do remember from school, right? Checks and balances, and the legislative, the judicial, and they all check each other.
Mhm.
I feel like those checks are gone.
Mhm. Yeah, I
And so
agree.
lawsuits now, I'm like, well, is it going to do anything?
We'll
You
see,
know?
but we're gonna say bye to Tam because she's got a life of her own. And
Thank
you
you
so
for joining
much.
us.
Yeah, it was fun.
we're gonna have her back on for
Okay.
sure.
Oh boy.
Be prepared for that. All
I'll be
right.
more prepared next time.
No, you were great. I know. I
What? You were excellent. Like, you taught us so much.
Well,
Isn't she
thank
so
you.
smart?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was smart once.
I have
Once
to-
upon a time.
Oh,
I say that all the time too.
I know.
Now I fumble through words.
We're smart, independent, capable
I would
women.
stay if I didn't have to go get
I'm still smart.
Oh,
I
no,
was
it's
just
okay.
smarter.
I have to admit, Tamara did not know what she was walking into. I was
You ambushed her.
I was mean. I did. She was like, I was like, come over. She's like, oh, but you have to work. I was like, no, I'm not working. And she's like, okay, do you want coffee? Like, I'll be over in 20 minutes. And it's fine. I just make sure she doesn't. Stupid dog. I love my dog. I love my dog. Like, I love dogs. I'm wearing a dog sweater. Big
Right.
fan of dogs. I'm not a fan of when they roll in carcasses and feces and then want to come in
Right.
on your couch. Is what
Right.
you are awful. Oh my God. She's laying on 2 pillows and an iPad.
Of course. She's like, you know what? I'm covered in poop. Let me lay on as many things as I can.
At least I have a leather couch so I can wipe it down.
Like, yeah,
I just can't right now.
I know.
Okay, so anyway, Tam's departure was well timed because we were at the end of Martin Luther King's letter. I want to just see if there's another quote that I can pull out here. But to be honest, like this letter is just so powerful and it's so inspiring and it's so important, and it just definitely should not be banned. It should be something that scholars read.
It got banned how? Like, who banned it? Like, who
Yeah,
challenged it?
It was parents. It's not just Florida. I mean, I say it's banned in Florida because of the Stop Woke Act,
Right.
and you can't, because this is full of instances of oppression and discrimination. At one point in the letter, he talks about police brutality and the unsolved bombings of Black churches, which again is not something that we're taught, that I was taught, or that we do teach, at least here in Florida. We don't teach about, how Black people and families and churches and businesses were treated during this time. all we say is, oh, the Civil Rights Act happened and now everyone's equal. And that's
Right.
just an example of how history is whitewashed.
And I see that a lot when people also, they love to say like, oh, that happened a long time ago. People are free now. And look, they're still, using this as an excuse, but they don't realize how racism continues to affect their lives and
Mhm.
how Jim Crow laws came into effect
Mhm.
and, all those other things that played into why we're not, quote unquote, getting over it,
Exactly. Yes, because that's a great point. Like this letter would describe that point exactly, like why they are, quote, we are, quote unquote, not getting over it, right?
Right,
And it's a reminder of what was and what still is.
right.
And so I think to answer your question about like why this specifically was flagged by parents in whatever state it was, and why it wouldn't fly here in Florida is because of lines like this. When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When your first name becomes the N-word and your middle name becomes Boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John. And when your wife and mother are never given the respected title of Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro living constantly at a tiptoe stance, never knowing what to expect next, and plagued with inner fears and outer resentments. And it goes on, and his words are just so powerful that I won't do it justice by reading
Right.
it. I honestly feel bad reading it.
And the hotel thing, that still happens today, where people show up for their reservations, and when they realize they're Black, they get turned away with an excuse, of course. But stuff like this still happens today.
It just happens in a different way. Like it's still happening.
Right.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
not as blatantly obvious, but they know why it's happening.
I don't know. I don't really know what to say at this point. I'm passing it to you now.
I mean, I just think it's important for us to continue just teaching our own kids about it. And like the whole thing with like I told my kids, I don't care what exam you take and you have to call it the Gulf of America.
Oh my
You are
gosh.
going to write the Gulf of Mexico every single time.
Mhm.
And if your teacher marks it wrong, I will deal with them
Right,
because we're not doing that. We're not
Mhm.
calling it the Gulf of America.
right.
Little things like that. Like I just feel like we have to keep telling our kids,
To resist.
yes.
And it might feel pointless or like that it's not making a difference, but little acts of resistance like that are like little steps, that we're taking forward to a better future. And we have to, especially as moms with kids who can't imagine like what the world's going to be like when they actually have to go out there and fend for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to find a way to hold, we have to buy these books. We have to hold on to them. I'm just afraid, and maybe that's just me being a little dramatic or hysterical, that things are going to start disappearing,
Yeah.
So that's
ooh.
why I mean, like, we need physical, like, we need to go back to the days of owning our DVDs
Well, no,
and our CDs.
the internet can be really good in that regard because once it's there forever, and it was really hard to remove. And I'll give you a really good example of how the CDC was is going through, because it's a government organization, and so it's being told to get rid of any published articles with certain words in them or whatever. But then I saw a post. It says the entire archive of all CDC data sets uploaded before January 28th, 2025 have been backed up on Internet Archive. So science will never be silenced. And what Internet Archive is like this open source like website where you can go to it and you can like search for something, right? Like here's one that says, it's going so fast, it's a video, but it's like smallpox. Like here's a study on smallpox. Like you can go to this website, click on the smallpox link, and then download all the CDC data sets and scientific literature on whatever smallpox study that they did. And that's important because for a little bit there, we didn't know what the fate of all of the science that the CDC has worked so hard to curate. We didn't know what the fate of that looks like. And now
Right.
we know it's safe. And that's thanks to the internet, right? I don't know. It's balance is important. So like I'm going to try and stay informed and share what I know and share what is concerning to me with my followers so that and hopefully
Right.
we can do the same so that we can all at least, resist a little bit. And
Yeah.
then if a little bit, if, a lot of us resist a little bit, then that results in a lot of resistance, right?
And there is resistance. Like I see
Right.
it. And again, my algorithm,
Hmm.
is showing me a lot of resistance. There's people who are upset with everything that's happening.
And there's actual protests, but like people like us that maybe don't live in a big city that can go to a protest, or we have jobs and kids to take care of, so we can't go to a protest. This is our way of resisting.
I know, I know. And I've struggled with that, but I think I finally reached a point where I'm like, I can't do it. And so now I'm relying on the people who stayed on there to share that information on the platforms that I'm on.
I
And I
get
just
it.
look at it as like it's one less click,
Hmm. No,
that I'm giving them.
and you got to do what you got to do for sure. Yeah. I wish, apparently I'm
I
giving
don't
the
know
thumbs
what
up
it
to
is.
Zoom. I don't know. Thumbs up.
Oh,
You got to give, I don't know. But I wish, maybe we should start posting. It's not working for you.
no.
Um, we should start posting more on Blue Sky.
Yeah. There's another one. What is it? Discord?
Oh yeah,
Hearing
Discord.
about that?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, and the lady, the governor that I follow, Sharon McMahon, Sharon Says So, she keeps telling people in her stories on Instagram, she's like, some of you are telling me that my stories are like not that they're not going in the right order, or some of them are deleted before they should be deleted. And to those of you that are saying that, I don't know what's going on, but I wouldn't be surprised at anything at this point.
Right.
So follow me on Substack, and you could for free you could subscribe to her newsletter and stay informed that way.
Okay.
And she's not paid by, any billionaire, and she can
Right.
say whatever she wants, and she has not been censored yet. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. They're being very careful.
Hmm.
But what bothered me too was that suddenly you couldn't search or hashtag certain things like
Yeah.
Democrats and things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, the information's there. You can post it, but it's not going to reach the people
I
it
agree.
used to reach. And to me,
Hmm.
it's weird.
Right, which is why I just follow a few accounts like Robert Reich. I think that's how you say his name. It's Robert Reich, and Sharon McMahon, and a couple other accounts that are constantly like, on the front lines figuring out what's going
Yeah.
on. But also like going back to what we were saying with Tam about how you can't just like sit here and have information front loaded into your brain by someone that you trust just because you trust them. Like you need to fact check your information, which is
Right.
what so if Robert Reich posts something that I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that. Like I'll go and I'll look for like five different sources by five different media outlets that say either the same thing or something similar. And I know that
Right.
it's an actual thing that's happening. Because
Yeah.
there are instances where it's like, that's actually not true. Oh, it was maybe this was in our group chat, but it was someone was like, did you see that if you ask Siri or Alexa, I think it was not Siri because Siri's Apple and Alexa is Amazon, and that's a huge difference. So if you
Huge.
ask Alexa what President Abraham Lincoln accomplished, she will say, I don't know the answer to that. She just said it.
She's
She just
going to
said it.
too.
Hey, Alexa, what did President Abraham Lincoln accomplish? See, okay, Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. She's going on and telling me all the things that he accomplished. So she's doing what she's supposed to be doing.
Right.
And then in the TikTok video, this woman was like, she said, see, I don't know the answer to that. And so they are censoring, important
Right.
information like that. And that's just is not true. So I went and did it and, I proved it wrong. So
My
that's,
husband did the same thing before the election.
uh-huh.
And he was like, look, if you ask who's going to win the election, it says Kamala Harris, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And so he tried it. He's like, yeah, I saw the video. And I'm like, you know that you can have Alexa have like a pre-recorded answer. So you can
Mhm.
set it up to respond to you a certain way.
Mhm.
But if you just ask it,
Mhm.
I'm like, go ahead and ask. And
Yeah.
then he did, and he was like,
Oh,
oh.
yeah.
Oh.
And see, and you got to remember that users will do that for views because they
Right.
want views and they want to create content and they want to do that
Clickbait, rage
Yeah.
baiting. Yeah.
Which is why I only follow like vetted, reliable sources. And even then, when they post something, I'm like, well, I'm going to look and see who else has said this about. And that just goes to what Tam was saying, and you and I keep saying is like, there's no critical thinking.
Right.
And that goes back to defunding public education. And maybe it's not on purpose, whatever. The fact still lies that if we defund public education and continue at the rate that we're doing it right now, it's not going to get any better. It's going to get way worse,
Right.
which begs the question is it on purpose? I think it is.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I think that's been the plan from the get-go. We've talked about it when we were specifically talking about book bans. That is all part of their agenda, to get rid of books, to get rid of educators, the way they mistreated teachers, and
Mhm.
all of that
I think we've gone on long enough.
long enough.
Thanks for those of you that stuck with it, and sorry for our hiatus. Jennifer got a job, so we're both technically working moms that are also somehow still going to do a podcast, but we're gonna do it somehow.
Somehow, some way, we'll make time for it.
So if you're still listening to this, please subscribe and share this with anybody to help us in hopes that, one day we can quit our day jobs and just do this full time. That's a pipe dream, right?
Right.
What is
Fingers crossed, knock on wood.
That's the right word, right? Or term. Pipe dream is like a dream that you don't think is going to happen, but you still.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least that's what I consider it, right?
Okay, yeah, that's what I consider it. But that is our pipe dream. So that and opening up a banned bookstore, which we can do
Yes.
if
that
our
is a big-
podcast is successful. So please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for listening. Remember, don't ban books.
ban bigots. And don't put them in the White House. This episode has been engineered and mixed by your hosts, Jennifer Mendoza and Courtney Green.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow us at MILF for Books. That's MILF, the number 4, books, on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it.
And don't forget to help the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.